Hello, I am Xarkun. This is World of Warships Legends. Rank 16, Anton Gurin on the screen. Sims and Rumble as his inspirations. This is the commander and build I will be using on the Tier 7 Russian or Soviet destroyer Tashkent. Now, we're going to be on North Domination mode for this battle, and this is a video that I've been wanting to make for a little while. I think somebody recently requested it on my Discord server. A video about the Tashkent post-buff. In the last update, or maybe 2 updates ago now, I honestly can't even remember, the entire Russian destroyer line received a buff. And that buff mainly went toward increasing the overall range of their guns, as well as improving maneuverability characteristics like rudder shift. Unfortunately, I can't remember how far I could get the Tashkent's guns to reach out before the buff, but right now, with this Gurin build, using, I think it's called Sidestep in the 4th row of skills, that increases the gun range and increases the dispersion of incoming fire. Very useful skill. Comes at the cost of increasing the rudder shift time, but with that Sidestep skill and Rumble as inspiration, as well as the epic booster of battle propensity flag, the guns on my Tashkent are shooting out to 13.8 kilometers, which is by far and away the longest gun range of any destroyer yet in the game. We'll see what happens when they add the Khabarovsk, which I suspect will play a lot like this ship. Anyway, that gun range is quite useful, and so is the rudder shift improvement on the Tashkent. I don't know the exact numbers, but this is a gunboat through and through. It's got 6 130mm guns, a little bit bigger than the guns you'd find on your typical destroyer. They have very good HE and AP Alpha Strike, although, you know, they're destroyer caliber guns. They are going to have a bit of a hard time penetrating the thicker armor on battleships. So, to begin with, right off the bat, as far as how do you play this thing, I think you start off the way that we're doing here against this Grosse Kurfürst, which is we're trying to light a fire, we're firing at him from a very, very far range, and we intend to maneuver, bait him into firing back at us, and then dodge his shots. As soon as we get that fire lit, we switch to the armor piercing, which I find gets more consistent damage on ships when they're broadside. Battleships, cruisers, whatever, the only thing you wouldn't want to use it on is a broadside destroyer, because for that your HE is going to be good enough. But you got a broadside battleship, broadside cruiser, my personal advice to you is open up using the HE, try to start some fires, and then move to the AP to deal a little bit more consistent damage over time. And what you want to do is, I think, buff the range on these guns as much as possible. So that means using Gurin as your commander if you don't have any of the special Russian commanders like Rumble or Sergio Splendento. Using Gurin and his Sidestep skill, ideally if you do have Rumble, he would be one of your inspirations, and also running that epic booster of battle propensity flag. You want to engage targets like battleships and cruisers at long range. I'd say the sweet spot is 10 kilometers plus, so anything at 10 kilometers to the max range, that's kind of the sweet zone for engaging them with the Tashkent's guns. Being that far away will allow you to juke their shots by shifting the rudder, messing with the throttle as well. And if they shoot at you and miss, it means they're not shooting at your teammates. Unfortunately, in this game, we don't get to play the Tashkent as ideally as I'd like to play it. What I think the primary goal of the Tashkent is contrary to most other destroyers in the game, the Russians, and I guess the French as well, aren't very good at capturing capture points in domination mode, or, capturing the base in capture the base mode. They have pretty poor concealment. In fact, I really haven't spec'd in too much to the Tashkent's concealment. As far as my mod selection goes, I am using the concealment mod, but that's not necessarily for the concealment. It's much more for the incoming fire dispersion buff that the concealment mod grants you. In any case, the sea detectability range on my Tashkent here is 6.5 kilometers, so it's going to be outspotted by pretty much any other destroyer of any other nation. And even if you do spec heavily into the concealment, it's only going to go so far, and you're likely still going to be outspotted. That makes taking capture points when there are other enemy destroyers still alive in the game somewhat problematic. And the turret traverse on the Tashkent is still slow. In the first mod slot, I actually don't have aiming systems mod 1. I have the mod that increases the speed at which the turrets traverse and also increases the time that it takes the guns to reload. Consequently, in the fourth mod slot, I have the gun mod that increases the reload time. So the reload is something like 4.5 seconds, which is pretty good. And then the turret traverse time is something like 18 seconds, which is manageable. So not only is your concealment rather poor, but the turret traverse is also rather slow. That makes it somewhat dangerous to get into close-range knife fights with destroyers. Not only are they likely to outspot you, but there are several of them which are more capable of getting their turrets on target. Therefore, you don't really want to go for caps. Instead, I think what you want to do is go for the flanks. Even though you can get outspotted by a lot of other destroyers, that doesn't preclude you from doing a destroyer's main job in any game mode, which is to spot. You are still fully capable in the Tashkent of outspotting cruisers and battleships and giving your team eyes on something to shoot at. So ideally, at least for the first part of the game, you avoid the cap circles, and notice we haven't taken a cap circle at all. Instead, what I think you want to try to do is get around an enemy flank, and you only want to get around an enemy flank that is being engaged by your teammates. Once you do that, you start guns blazing, sort of like we are here against this vanguard, and try to attract their attention. Annoy them by trying to light them on fire with your HE, and if they're giving you broadside, switch to the AP to do a little bit more consistent damage over time. You see, we've racked up 102,000 damage. A lot of that did come from our torpedo strike on the Bismarck. The Tashkent does have torpedoes which range out to 8 kilometers. Those have also been buffed, by the way. Previously, their speed was pretty slow. I think they went at 55 knots base speed. That's been buffed to a 60 knot base speed. So they're a little bit more usable, a little bit less slow, but they are fairly short range compared to a lot of other Tier 7 destroyers which have torpedoes that range out to 9 or 10 kilometers. So the torpedoes are mostly useful if you get too close to an enemy. You can fire the torpedoes as you're kiting away, or you can ambush people like we did with that Bismarck. But primarily, I think this is a gunboat and not a torpedo boat. And more than that, it's a long-range gunboat, which is sort of the point I've been alluding to throughout this entire discussion. The guns have very long range, and they also, much like the Russian cruisers, have pretty flat firing arcs and high shell velocity. At least I think they do. Obviously, the shell velocity stats aren't available to us in-game. But the shells are easy to land on target, and they don't take as long to reach the target as something with slower velocity shells, like the American destroyers. So it's a long-range gunboat. Essentially, you want to use that range to your advantage, maintain fire on the enemies. It really doesn't matter if you're spotted, although if you don't have to be spotted, you know, because you're using a smoke screen or momentarily making use of an island, any kind of shots you can take without being spotted are very low risk shots, and then the damage that you deal in those, you know, it's a little bit better in that sense. But then, just as you're laying into the enemies with your guns, you pay attention to what they're doing. If they're going to respond to you with a salvo of their own, you constantly use those WASDACs or WAS hacks, you know, like on the PC, WASD, except on the console, it's X and circle. Mess with the throttle, turn the rudder, etc., and that's what you want to do. Ideally, you want to do it on a flank. We haven't really done that in this game at all, but I think we have demonstrated some nice instances of longer range gun engagements with this particular destroyer. So, you know, in the sense of most destroyers in the game, this one is not necessarily a capping destroyer because of its poor concealment. It's not a knife fighting destroyer either because of its rather slow turret traverse. Instead, it's more of a harassment distraction type destroyer with its extremely long gun range, good shell velocity, and good firing arcs, and also its speed. With this build on Xarkun, I do have, I can't remember what the skill is called, maybe it's called flank speed. It's the one that increases speed at the price of increasing detectability, and I've got this thing going at 46 point something knots without the speed boost. With the speed boost, it can achieve speeds well in excess of 50 knots. At ranges of 10 kilometers and further, or at least at those longer ranges, that makes you incredibly difficult to hit, particularly if you're messing with the speed and changing your course. So, honestly, this is like kind of a mini little cruiser, a zippy kind of cruiser that's meant to annoy you with HE spam and then nickel and dime you with a little bit of AP spam if you're showing it broadside. I will say that Le Fantasque in the French line can also fulfill the same sort of role as the Tashkent, although I know a lot of people advocate playing it as more of a torpedo boat and using, what's his name, a Boyano or something? A Boyano instead of Violette. But the Fantasque is a lot like the Tashkent too, and by the way, I think it has better armor piercing. I've scored a couple citadels on cruisers like a broadside Chapayev with Le Fantasque's AP at ranges of like 10 or 11 kilometers. And I haven't really been able to replicate that with the Tashkent, although its AP is effective and can score citadels on cruisers at close range. In any case, this game is about wrapped up. We've done 117,000 damage, 150-something main battery hits, 5 fires, and 3 torpedo hits, which did, in fairness, contribute pretty heavily to our overall damage total. Probably not the best representative game on how to play the Tashkent as far as the strategy I'm talking about, going over on flanks and sort of trying to shoot at the enemy team, distract them while your team is also engaging them. Hopefully, you know, they turn toward you, give your teammates some nice juicy broadside shots and all that. But I really do like the Tashkent as a destroyer. I find it pretty fun to play, especially in this role that I've been describing throughout the course of this video. And I'll be playing more of it, so hopefully I can get a game that sort of better represents that flanking kind of strategy, and maybe a Le Fantasque game that demonstrates its capabilities as a gunboat, and also a torpedo boat. I have bumped up Abunno, or whatever his name is, to level 11, so he's much more usable. For now, though, I think we've said all we needed to say about the Tashkent. This battle is about to be over. We're just farming some damage on this Amagi before the time expires and we win. We're not going to end up top of the leaderboard, but definitely a decent game in terms of damage and even in terms of XP gained. Hope you liked it. Let me know what you think of the Tashkent if you have it in the comment section, and give the video a thumbs up as well. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done that too. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.